Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Today is January 5th, 2023, and welcome to our first installment of the year of the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project founded by Natalie Armstrong-Motin in the spring of 2020. Every Thursday morning, Jean Lawler and I are honored to host another cutting-edge webinar for mediators, arbitrators, lawyers, and anybody who negotiates. As you know, there is no charge for these great webinars. Rather, we ask you to contribute to a food bank if you like what you see. And our audiences have been so very generous in contributing in honor of our great speakers. One of my favorite parts of the webinar each week is when we announce the running total. Jean Lawler, do the honors.
Well, thank you and Happy New Year. Good morning, good evening, everyone. So great to be back with you. So our running total right now, if you're ready for it, it's just amazing. $350,609.35. So that's over 3,500,000 meals that have been served around the world, thanks to the generosity of this little grassroots group. And it's just amazing. So thank you all so much.
Amazing indeed. Thank you, Jean, and thank you so much to our generous audiences and our wonderful speakers. We're going to start the new year off with a bang. A wonderful speaker, Dr. Mark Goulston. Mark Goulston, MD, is a business psychiatrist and coach who focuses on freeing people's minds by having them open up about thoughts that eat away at them that they've rarely told anyone. That frees them to having realizations and breakthroughs that they have never been able to have. He's the author or co-author of 9 books, translated into 42 languages, with his book Just Listen becoming the top book on listening in the world, and his book Talking to Crazy, How to Deal with Irrational and Impossible People, going viral in Russian. He's a former UCLA professor of psychiatry, FBI and police hostage negotiation trainer, and he hosts the highly ranked podcast, My Wakeup Call. One of his singular missions is improving teen mental health and preventing teen suicide. He's the executive producer of the documentary, What I Wish My Parents Knew. In addition, he recently received the Shine the Light Media Award for his focus on mental health from the Los Angeles County Medical Association. Mark is also a dear personal friend of mine, many years standing, and has given me a lot of wonderful advice on personal and professional issues throughout the year, and I treasure his friendship. Mark, with that, please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they are able, and then on with the presentation. The floor is yours.
You know, one of the best things about hearing great things about yourself is it gives you something to live up to. So, the Westside Food Bank. Well, I picked that because I live in the west side of Los Angeles, and like all the other food banks, it helps a lot of people. I want to share an anecdote from my practice. I hadn't thought about this, but years ago when I was practicing psychiatry and psychotherapy, I would often see depressed people. And I remember on some occasions, and this is how you open people up, by the way. It's something I call the 5 realies. People, when they talk about something, you repeat it to them and say, I understand that. I understand you're depressed, but what's really going on? Well, you know, I don't find any enjoyment in anything. And sometimes I think I'm a burden to people. Yeah, I understand you could feel that way, but what's really going on? And when you get to the 4th or 5th really, people open up. And that's what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're mediating and you take people aside, you might say, what's really going on? What do you really want to get out of this mediation? And with some of the depressed people, when I got to the 5th, what's really going on, some of them would say, I don't think I deserve to be happy. I'm self-absorbed. All I think about really is myself. I don't really care about other people. So maybe, just maybe, I don't deserve to be happy. And I said, really? I have a homework assignment. and I would give them a box of healthy snacks. And if you live in Los Angeles, you can't go for a walk almost any place, sadly, without passing a homeless person. And I said, here's your assignment. Every day, if or when you see a homeless person, I want you to have these healthy snacks in your pocket. And when you see the homeless person, I want you to reach into your pocket before you get close to them, because you don't want to scare them, and you don't want to reach into your pocket when you're upon them, and have an outstretched hand as you approach them. Identify yourself. Hi, my name's Mark. What's your name? And homeless people have names. You know, that may surprise some of you, but they have names. They're people. And I want you to do that. Hopefully they'll tell you their name. They may get a little jumpy, but you have in your outstretched hand this healthy snack. And then you say to them, here, I hope this will help out a little bit today. Because a lot of times people don't want to give money to homeless people because they think, oh, they're just going to buy drugs or alcohol with it. And then if they look at you, say, just hang in there. Just hang in there. And then say goodbye. And I want you to do that once a day. And as you might guess, when they came in for the next session, I would say, how did it go? And in a grumbling voice, they'd say, it helped. Meaning there's something about getting outside yourself, which is not easy to do, and just doing something for the world that you won't get any credit for other than from your conscience. So I just wanted to share that, because I think that's what we're doing with these food banks, is that if you can picture the people who go to the food banks, if you can picture those people smiling, thanking the people giving them the food, and picture that you enabled that. So I just wanted to share that as a way of opening up. So today we're going to talk about something I call the Persuasion Cycle. It's the only graphic inside my book, Just Listen, because I find that when you have a lot of graphics, a lot of footnotes, people feel guilty. They get distracted. Oh, do I have to go check out things? So there's only a single graphic. But before we get to that, I want to go. So there's 2 slides. You can do a screen share, a screenshot if you want. But this is something that I'd like you to write down, not just because I said it, but I think if you keep that in your mind, it can help you not get ahead of yourself. Because I'll share an insight about sometimes when we talk too much. And I would say I'd be talking too much already, but I was invited to be the presenter, so I get away with it. If you talk too much, and this was true of me, and I had to try to correct it because I wrote this book, Just Listen. But when we talk too much, what goes on in our minds subconsciously is probably for the first 30 seconds, you know, we're really being relevant to the situation at hand. But frequently, especially if you're a bit of an introvert, which I am, when you go past that 30 seconds or a minute, you're feeling good. You're just getting stuff off your chest. This is great. And you kind of disconnect from whether they're listening to you or not, because you're just feeling wonderful. You think you're being convincing. You think you're being compelling. This is wonderful. But then you get a sense unconsciously that you're talking too much, and they may be smiling like this, but they've checked out. So the third part of this sort of trifecta of conversational doom is you then try to reel people back in, and you talk even more. And that's sort of shuts the door. So I think it's important to keep these things in mind, because sometimes you'll have this idea, oh, that was so convincing, that was so compelling. And they smile and you think it's a yes, but they're smiling, being polite, because they don't want to let you know that you're talking too much. I've tuned out. Can you get to the point already? What does this have to do with me? So those are the kinds of things that are on people's minds. And there's only one more slide that you can also take a screenshot of.
Cycle slide.
Good. So this is not how it looks in the book, but if you follow it, if you can imagine that whoever you're dealing with is resistant to you, resistant because they're upset, they're tweaked, they're frustrated that they have to settle for mediation when they wanted to fight this case. So they may be a little bit resistant to being cooperative. And so I think it makes sense intuitively. How do you get them to start to listen to you? And then how do you get them, after they listen, to consider what you're saying? And then how do you get them to be willing to do what you're suggesting? And then hopefully get them to do and be glad they did and continue to do. So I'm hoping that that makes sense intuitively. And you're welcome, again, you can screenshot these slides, but I think they're helpful to keep in mind, because a lot of times out of our anxiety and our desire to be complete, and we need to make sure that we give them the instructions, this is how the mediation is going to go, that a lot of times we skip a step. And something I might be asking people to do, and maybe we can put this in the chat, because I'd like this to be interactive, is probably the biggest step, of course, is buy-in. And what I'm going to invite people to do in the chat, or if people could raise their hand and you could see that, people could share. I remember a case where they seemed resistant. They seemed really unhappy to be there. And this is what we did, and it seemed to open them up. So I think, as entertaining as I'm trying to be, you will listen to a peer more than you'll listen to me. This is all fine. I'll give you a story from my. I've had a varied background, as the introduction said. So I was an advisor in the O.J. Simpson trial to the prosecution. I don't spend a lot of time talking about it because, if you remember, they lost. But I remember meeting Gil Garcetti, the father of the former mayor. And he was the DA. You may remember some of the characters: Marcia Clark, Bill Hodgman, Christopher Darden, Johnny Cochran, O.J. Simpson. And so I ran into him and I said, I don't really know anything about juries or trials. But can I send you an observation? And he's looking at me like, what? Another person wanting to be famous, another person wanting to get into this trial, another. And so I said, so imagine he's resistant. So how do I get him to listen and consider? And I want you to think of the parallels in your own mind. And I sent him a fax. We used to have fax machines back then. He gave me his fax number. I said, if I was selecting a mainly Black jury from Los Angeles, there's a couple of questions I might want to ask them. One is, have you ever changed your mind about the way you felt about someone? Because if they never change their mind about an abusive father or mother, they're not going to change their mind about O.J. Simpson if they think of him as a hero. And then the second question was, so you want people who are capable of changing their minds. And the second question was, what made you change your mind? And if they come up with logic, you better have a lot of really convincing evidence. And if what they come up with sounds kind of emotion driven, you better have a compelling and riveting case. So I sent that to him. And then he responded and he said, spoke with Marcia and Bill Hodgman, and we never would have thought of that ever. It was so obvious. Would you want to join us? Because this is looking to be, kind of an interesting trial. And we don't want you in our strategy meetings. We'd like you to, come to court when you can, and then just fax us some of your off the wall ideas. And we won't even tell you when we're using them. But it might be interesting for you. So what caused them to listen and consider what I had to say? Well, I think if the first response from the other person is, I never would have thought of that, and that is relevant. So it needs to be relevant to what they're trying to accomplish. So what is it that you can say to a client or a case, to people, where they might think, I never would have thought of that, and it's relevant? Another way to get through to people is when people's first impression of you is, how did you know that about me when I didn't tell you anything? And if you can deliver something like that, that's non-judgmental, people are intrigued. They're intrigued and they want to know, what else do you know about? In the introduction, it mentioned that on LinkedIn, you'll see that my profile is a free your mind coach. And so one of the things that I know, and part of this is my psychiatry background, is one of the things I know is that there is, inside every person is something that is eating away at them. And it's really stressing them out. And there are things that are eating away at them that they don't tell anyone. So it's a little bit like, kind of a confessional, but again, I'm hoping this is relevant to your work. And what I would like to do is, could people raise their hand, or you could do this in the chat, although I have trouble multitasking and looking in the chat. So I'd prefer, would people want to share something? I see that we have Maria has raised her hand, and Jeff and Jean, I would love you to also, weigh in. Maria, can you talk to us about a situation where the people were resistant, and then you somehow got them to listen and consider what you had to say?
Absolutely. So I had a forced mediation by the court. I was apprehensive to go to the mediation because it was my soon-to-be ex-husband, who was extremely abusive and very, angry person. And so, I'm forced, so I have to go. And this mediator is going to make the last decision. It doesn't go back to the court. And so we're in the office, and I'm never to be left alone. And his wife works with him, and he's going on. And all of a sudden, this explosive situation arises. And so I sit back, and he can see my body language. And then he gets him to calm down, and he asked me to speak. And I start to say how grateful that I am that he was such a great provider. I just talked about the positive things that I remembered of him that were true. And I brought that about, and it took him back, and it calmed him down, and he got into tears. And he was very grateful, and his whole mannerism changed, and the whole meeting changed direction to the point where he came over to me and they said, "Is it okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he apologized. And then he listened to the rest of the instruction. It was so amazing to see, because it wasn't my intention. I just thought, if I speak from my heart and what I know of him, I didn't have the agenda. I didn't know that it was going to turn out that way, because my experience of him in the last 3 years and $300,000 was not that. And so it was very surprising development, but it shifted his mindset. You know, he was a narcissist, and it was amazing to watch. And then he was opened. He was open to receive, to listen to the mediator. So that I'm complete.
You know, you're a great storyteller, Maria. Thank you.
I wrote a book that Dr. Betty Uribe did the forward to. So yes.
Well, you set the bar kind of high. You remind me of something. So I'll just weigh in, but I want to hear from all of you, because I think people got a lot out of that, Maria, that you flipped how he was hearing you. So instead of in his mind thinking you were being critical and fearful of him, and narcissists smell fear and they attack. And so you flipped a switch in his brain. Recently, I coach people, and someone was saying, what's the best way to respond to negative feedback from a boss or a supervisor? And I said, unless the person is really abusive, you have to realize that they feel a little anxious about giving you negative feedback, because they think you're going to react. They think you're going to get upset. You're going to get defensive. You're going to get hurt. And you have to realize that that it's awkward on their side giving you negative feedback. And so what we worked out is that the next time that happened, this woman said to her boss, because I said, pause for 3 seconds after they give you the feedback, because they're waiting for you to fall apart. And then you look them in the eye and you say, I want to thank you for that. They're going to go, what? That's the last thing they're expecting. You say, I want to thank you for that, because I don't like to hear negative things or criticism, but I always learn from them after I take the stinger out. So you're going to make me better. And she said, it totally flipped their relationship. Why? Because she showed such grace. She showed such calmness. And in her boss's mind, he was probably thinking, I want to be like this person, because I get defensive, because I wouldn't want to hear this sort of thing. And so it flipped the relationship, because he immediately respected her for being able to do something that he could never do. So I hope that makes sense to some of you, and some of you might say, I'm going to use that today. Who else? Do we have any other people raising their hands? Or Jeff, I'd like to hear from you and Jean.
Well, Mark, one situation that we many times find in mediation is that the the clients come in with a great emotional charge. Lawyers usually much less so, much more balanced reason and emotion for the lawyers. And there's a question of, how do we get the clients to consider possibilities in settlement that they hadn't taken seriously before, or perhaps hadn't really considered at all before, but which their lawyers know are probably where this case is going to go if it's going to settle. And I find many times the client has to see their lawyer as their champion, their gladiator, their fighter, and really engage in the effort to try to get that gold-plated solution for the client. And after enough hours, usually by 2 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the effort is not going anywhere. The other side is not going to pay or take what the one side thinks ought to take place. And then something happens where the client starts to think, well, this isn't working. Maybe I should listen to my lawyer. Maybe we should consider some possibilities that are that we haven't considered seriously or at all before. These possibilities that my lawyer is mentioning over and over. Can you comment on what the psychology is that's behind that, and how we as mediators can help to catalyze in clients' minds the possibility of considering different sorts of settlements than the ones they were considering when the mediation began?
So at the beginning, what you're often dealing with is someone who needs to be right and can't stand to be wrong. And that is what's holding onto their mind. I may not be right, but I'm certainly not wrong. And one of the ways to shell that out, because the more you can get people to express what's going on underneath, the more that they are likely to listen to you. So something that, tell me if you think this is doable, Jeff, or other people can weigh. If we imagine that inside their minds there's a continuum between they dreaded coming to the mediation, and at the other level is they were glad to be able to put this situation behind them. So if you imagine that that's the continuum in their mind, they're not consciously aware of it, but one of the ways you might empathically prepare them, and you might take them aside, or you may take them aside with their lawyer and say, what we've discovered is that most people, when they come to a mediation, there's a part of them that dreads it, for whatever reason. And but if it goes okay, there's another part of them that would just be glad to have this finished so they could turn a corner. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is dread and 10 is I'm not happy about this, but I'm glad we were able to do it. As we get started, where are you? On a scale of 1 to 10. And then whatever they say, they're participating with you. And then you could say, what would need to happen to move you, if you're a 4, to move you to a 6? And then what you want to do is in their mind, they know in their mind that why they're there is because their lawyer or other people think this would be better for you to settle than drag it on and all the time and money and stress. But the more that you can get them to brainstorm with you, and why would that increase your willingness? And can you give me a situation in your life that you dreaded and you were able to move past it? So what you're doing is you're trying to tap into all the experiences in them. There's many things that I have done in my life, and I have a company that we may wake up again called Michelangelo Leadership. And the idea, actually it's called Michelangelo Mindset, I think. And the idea is that Michelangelo famously said, I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set it free. So if in your mind you can think that if they're there, if they've agreed to this, even if they're kicking and screaming, that inside them is the willingness, maybe not the eagerness, but the willingness to come to some sort of an agreement. Your challenge is to carve away everything that's getting in the way of that. And if your intention is that you believe it's there, that they wouldn't be in this room if there wasn't a part of them that was sick and tired of being mired in this conflict that are just taking time, money, and producing stress in them. And so if you can imagine yourself as a Michelangelo mediator, you know, your challenge and opportunity is to carve away, well, what's getting in the way of that? So does that make any sense, Jeff?
Absolutely, Mark. And sometimes we are met with the rather wooden and frustrating response, kind of two-dimensional response. Well, they should just offer us more money, or they should just agree to take less money, depending on which side of the equation they inhabit. And sometimes it's difficult to get through and really have those kinds of conversations with the clients. You know, sometimes their lawyers will say, look, let's just get down to the bargaining. We don't need this touchy-feely stuff. How do you recommend dealing with that commonplace challenge?
Well, I think the more that you have skin in the game as the mediator, the more they're willing to meet you. The more that you are purely transactional and wooden, the more that enables them to stay stuck. So there's a term that I use called the wince confrontation. And what that means is you wince because you're sharing something that you know is going to be painful to them. And you may take them aside and go, everything you're asking for is reasonable. It's just not realistic. Reasonable, it makes sense that you feel entitled to that. They owe you that. They owe you all this sort of stuff. But realistic is what's likely to happen. And you want to show that you're empathizing with the pain of having to settle for that. And again, I think the more that you tap into them, can you think of a situation in your life that dragged on, and your main regret when you finally settled it is that you didn't do it earlier? So do you follow me? So I'm a great believer that the more that you can evoke stories from people, the more they're connected to what they're saying, and the more you're trying to get them out of that transactional wooden mindset.
And you know, Mark, oftentimes we as mediators, many mediators, think that one way to get through that wooden two-dimensional approach is to have people in the same room, what we call the joint session, where people have an opportunity to listen to each other's lawyers at least, and have an opportunity perhaps to participate if their lawyers think it's okay and actually speak. As mediators, we think that can go a long way in many cases to reduce the demonization of the other side, the impersonal views that people get of the other side as demonic monsters, by actually seeing them in the flesh. And many times as mediators, we are met with resistance from lawyers and sometimes clients. Oh, I don't want to be in the same room as them. It'll just devolve into an argument. We already know everything that they have to say. We get resistance like that. And yet we think it would be beneficial. What can we, first of all, do you think we're right or wrong, given that every case is different, of course? And what can we do to try to promote that kind of human-to-human contact and overcome resistance to it?
Well, my background is I'm a medical doctor, and I am very sensitive to creating a surgical field. So even though I wasn't a surgeon, I remember when I rotated through my surgery clerkships, the surgical field is you don't let anyone mess up with it, mess around. And something you might say, and maybe this is in the orientation, is you might invite them to all meet. So you give them the benefit of, let's see how far we can get with everyone in the room, because and something I might say, even though you might not believe it, is I don't believe there is anyone in the room who is evil. What I believe is in the room are people who feel hurt and angry. So I could be wrong. Someone here might be evil, but I don't believe that. And I want to give us the chance to be in a space where you can see that there's no real evil people here. Yeah, there can be mean-spirited, upset, whatever. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt to see, how we might be able to work things out, because when we're in each other's presence, whatever the other person's saying, their body language, it's not left to your imagination. It's right there. And what I'm going to do, here's the surgical field, is when I get a sense that anybody in the room is reacting more and listening less, rather than trying to talk the person out of it, in that room, I'm going to call a timeout. And whoever that person is, and it could be the attorney, it could be whoever, it's like a sidebar. And we're going to go somewhere, outside the room, and say to the other people who aren't reacting, go grab a cup of coffee. And then what I'm going to do is find out what is triggering you. I know I couldn't help but notice that something triggered you, and when it triggered you, you stopped listening, because when people are triggered, they can't listen. So what was that? And then I would again try to draw that out of that. Well, he said or she said, and it's just like, oh wow, I can understand that. I can understand why, going forward, you're probably not going to reconcile. But I get them to try and talk that out of them, out of themselves. There's a technique in my book, Talking to Crazy. It's called the FUD crud technique. And it's called FUD crud because that makes it memorable. And what FUD stands for, and you can use this in your relationships, in your marriages, with your teens. When someone vents, think to yourself, FUD crud, FUD crud, FUD crud. When someone vents, let them vent. Don't react. Pause for 3 seconds. And I bring that up because often when they're doing that, they're trying to manipulate you. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get you so angry that you're off balance. The way that difficult people get the better of us is they push us into our rage and we're uncomfortable with it. So knowing that they're trying to do that, what you say to the person, because they're a little bit perplexed that this manipulation didn't work. What's going on? And the FUD crud approach is you look at them and you say, you seem frustrated and I think you're holding back. What? Yeah, you seem frustrated and I think you're holding back because I think you're also upset and disappointed. So can you tell me what you're frustrated, upset, and disappointed about? And what you want to do is you want to milk from them each of those. And see if you say to someone, stop being angry, you sound angry, they get defensive. That's why we use the word upset instead of you're angry. I'm not angry. But it's so counterintuitive And you find out, so what is it that you're frustrated about? What is it that I did or failed to do that's got you frustrated? And you want to get that out of them. And then you say, and from the sound of that, if I was you, I'd be upset. What is it that you're upset about? And you milk that out of them. And what you really want to do is get them to, what are you disappointed about? Are you disappointed in me? Are you disappointed in yourself? Are you disappointed in the situation? Here we are again, and it never gets better. But can you see that by approaching this, when you can get the conversation into what are you disappointed about, that they're calmer? Does that make sense intuitively all to anybody?
Yes, and it takes some high degree of self-confidence and maturity, Mark, doesn't it, to say, are you disappointed in me? And what have I done to lead us to this FUD, the FUD part, right? Frustration, upset, disappointed.
Oh, but I'll tell you, it is magic, especially when you say, and it's not what have I done or what have I failed to do. I'll tell you, if you're doing this with a partner or a spouse, and some people have said to me, it was the best conversation we've had in years. And some people have said, how do we make it even better? So when they get to the disappointed stage and they're calmer, what you say to this person is, at my worst, how awful can I make you feel? What? Yeah, at my worst, how awful can I make you feel? Have I ever made you feel that you weren't worth my undivided attention? And again, you don't defend yourself at all, because you watch that what's happening is they're getting stuff off their chest that they've never gotten off their chest. And then the next step is, take me to the worst moments for you. And again, rather than getting defensive, what you're seeing is, oh my God, we're having a conversation like we've never had. And then again, even you may not even remember it, but you don't make them wrong. And what will happen is you, without being controlling, you're in charge of a conversation that could flip your whole relationship. And then what they may do, because you're not getting defensive, you're inviting them to get off their chest, they may even start to cry with relief because they hate hating you. And then if you're fortunate and it gets to that point, it may be so intimate that they can't look you in the eye. They're just crying. And so we're talking about a personal relationship here, but hopefully there's some value in this. And at that point you say, look, so it's okay, look at me. And then that's where you totally own it. You say, I did that. I do that often. You deserve better than that. I'm going to fix it. I'm sorry.
Mark, it's very profound. Who couldn't benefit from that in terms of personal and intimate relationships? When we're in a mediation, a commercial case, we don't really have those, we likely don't have those kinds of intimate relationships.
Well, you can drill in, but when you drill into the
Yeah.
disappointed, if you can get the FUD going, you seem frustrated, I think you're holding back, and you get them to calm down, and you get them to really talk about what they were disappointed in. And then if you can say, and this can flip a switch in them. When they talk about that, you could say, let me ask you, did you feel more hurt from that or angry? And if you're lucky, and they can say, I was hurt. But can you imagine in your minds or empathic eye, any of you listening in, that's going to change the conversation? You know, and then you can lead them to, so what happened is that hurt kept going on and on and on, and it crossed over into you're getting angry. Is that true? Or let's throw in there fear. You not only felt hurt, you felt afraid. Is that true? And so what do you see the process that I'm suggesting? So you're right. It's look, if you're doing a mediation, it's a long day. And if you can do some of these things, what I would like to hear from people, because I like to be relevant. And, you know, you're probably thinking, well, he's a therapist, what are you going to do? But I would like to know that, can people, you know, raise their hand, because I don't want to waste your time, or in the chat, is this relevant? Because, you know, we have time, we can take it any direction you want, and I'm here to be of service.
Mark, while we're awaiting comments, you had mentioned FUD CRUD. Is there, does the CRUD stand for things as well?
No, the CRUD is just being cutesy,
Ah.
because it makes it more memorable.
Got it. So Ben Bertram has his hand up. Ben, would you like to ask a question?
I would. Thank you very much. Mark, I'm a huge fan. I read through Just Listen. Really changed my life. It's a very impactful book, and I practice it all the time. And it's amazing both to see the internal and external dynamics for helping walk people through the persuasion cycle, and also helping to walk myself through it a lot of times. And just so anyway, it's a classic, and I go back to it over and over. So first, I just want to say thank you for that. And second, I'm struggling with tendencies of codependency, and my relationship with my wife is somewhat codependent. And you do talk about in your book as far as like toxic people and avoiding these types of situations. And I guess, do you have any advice? Like, I don't really know quite what to ask, other than like, how does a person, I don't know. Yeah.
So there's something very disarming about saying to someone sincerely, I need your help with something. Right. I need your help with something. And if you say it in an inviting tone, they're going to be curious. So the tone can't be, I need your help with something. And hopefully that person will say, what? And I'll tell you, when you can speak what feels true, it is so freeing that it doesn't matter what they say, because you can say, I can't be more open or gracious than I just was. So I need your help with something. What? I'm getting very close to wanting to avoid you. And I know a lot of what's happened in your life is rejection, abandonment, yada, yada, yada. And I don't want to be a person who avoids you, but I'm close to it. And the reason I'm bringing it up, because I don't want to be another one of those people. And the reason I'm close to avoiding you, and you want to be very specific, observable behaviors, is that when we have conversations, from my point of view, when they get a little heated, this is what you do. It's my perception. Again, I could be wrong. It's my perception. This is what you do. Or this is what, and the do could be the other person says, fine, let's get a divorce, you know, I'm done with this. And I don't want to avoid you. Can you tell me what's going on when we get into a conversation? And that's what happens. There's a great book that I'll summarize in less than a minute by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry. It's called What Happened to You? And it talks about something called trauma-informed therapy. And what it basically says is, again, if the person isn't evil and they're acting up, something happened to them to cause them to act that way. And if instead of taking them on in their behavior, you can lean in and say, this is not who you are. I have a friend, a rabbi, and he was talking about how he would speak to his children when they messed up. And I thought this was so eloquent. I want to share it with you. He said, you know, my kids are basically good kids. And when they do something wrong, they already know they did something wrong. So if I'm rubbing it in, it's probably not going to make it better. And so they're already nervous that I'm going to lay into them. And what he would say to them instead is, what you just did is not who I believe you to be. What you just did is not who I believe you to be. And I don't think it's who you believe you to be. And then you can say, you know, so what was going on? But I thought that was so eloquent. So Ben, I hope there's a pony in there somewhere.
Thank you very much.
Mark, from the sublime back to the mundane. One challenge we often face in mediations is we get to the end and, you know, maybe one side started here and one side started here. And we're getting close, and nobody wants to go last. People think the idea of splitting the difference is kind of an unprincipled way. Nobody wants to abandon the negotiation. We can't get people to take that last step. What are your thoughts on how we can encourage people to do what is obviously in their interest at the end of a negotiation to get it behind them, but which they seem reluctant to do?
Well, I would take them each aside and say, you know, thank you for cooperating. Thank you for the progress we've made. I think where we're at right now is you don't like where we're at, and you don't want to leave until you're okay with it. So we're kind of in the psychological battleground. I don't like this, but it's possible to not like something and be okay with it, because the benefits of being okay with it, and we spent a long day doing this, is you might be able to put this behind you. I mean, you might be able to move on, you know, and so help me flesh that out, because that's where you want them to end up logically. You know, I didn't like the result, but I'm glad we got there because I'm okay with it. And now I think I can move on. So does that make sense, Jeff? So you give them that vocabulary and you pull from them, what is it that you don't like? And so what you're planting in their mind is the possibility. A lot of people who are black and white, well, how can you not like something and be okay with it? Well, because it gives you the benefit of moving on. And if you don't move on, it just extends the process. Time, money, stress, you know, and plus something I might throw in. And again, I believe that people, it's the Michelangelo that even though they're frustrated and angry, that there's a decent streak in them. I might say, and this is why you're making a pitch for the benefits of moving on, is how is this this situation impacting your relationships with other people? They can say, what? If you're like most human beings, you're frustrated here and you're kicking the dog somewhere else. That poor little dog who loves you. Anyway, so I hope that helps. We have some hands raised, and I
Yes,
can go.
Steve Sheldon, we have just a couple minutes left, so quickly, please.
Hi, Steve.
Steve, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Dr. Goulston, I do mostly family mediations, and one of the more difficult areas that really transition from law into emotions deal with long-term marriages, usually a wife who is older, in her 50s, mid-50s, where the issue of spousal maintenance is very important to her. There may be limited retirement assets. And I really appreciated your comment about the wincing or empathic sharing with the person that what they're asking for is reasonable, but not realistic. And I would appreciate your thoughts and any ideas on how to move a case like that to a resolution where the desire is unrealistic on the part of the spouse regarding spousal maintenance. How do I drill down and successfully resolve those kinds of issues, if you have any suggestions?
Well, I think one of the things you can say to either party is, I'm not here to judge whether you should get everything you want or not. I am just stating a fact that if the other person feels that what you're asking for is unfair, unrealistic, and in their mind, they don't feel you deserve what you feel entitled to, it's not going to work. So again, you're planting seeds that you want to draw out of them. You could say, I'm everything you're asking for, I'm not here to judge whether it's fair, unfair, unreasonable, but as long as the other person perceives that, unfair, unrealistic, you're asking, you're sounding entitled to something that they don't believe you deserve. Can you fill me in on this? Because as long as that's what they're thinking, they're not going to budge. So what you're trying to do is engage people in a non-transactional conversation. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. These are great questions. Maria, you started. You take it
Mark.
home, Maria.
Mark, we are out of time, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
And one of our commitments here on the New Possibilities Hour is to start on time and end on time. So Maria, perhaps you can get in touch with Mark through his LinkedIn QR code there and follow up offline. So
Yes.
thank you all very much, Mark. This has been an absolutely compelling and wonderful presentation, as I knew it would be. Thank you so much for participating, to our wonderful audience. Thank you so much for being here, a very large audience to start the year. If you're in a position to support the Westside Food Bank, WSFB.org, we really appreciate it, and please let us know so that we can add it to our running total. Today's Natalie Armstrong-Motin's birthday, Jean
Yes.
points out. So very happy birthday to our dear Natalie. We hope it's a wonderful day and the beginning of a wonderful year for you, Natalie. Thanks so much to everybody for being here. Natalie, Jean, great teammates. Mark, wonderful presentation, terrific audience. Thanks, everybody. And with that, we are complete.